Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jack Westin MCAT podcast. In this episode, we will be doing a CARS reading skills workshop with your hosts, Molly and Jack. In an episode like this, our goal is to go through one of our Jack Westin Daily CARS passages. Sentence by sentence, we'll share kind of what the key points are to understand from each sentence and each paragraph. And then we'll reflect on what the main idea of these passages are. This one that we're doing for today's episode is kind of a fun one, Jack. It's soccer fans, and the date for the passage is October 1st. If you're listening to this and it's not October 1st, no worries. We've got the link for you in the description. Definitely click on it, check it out. You could also find it on our website, jackwestin.com. But it's a pretty unique passage. I like the sports ones. What do you think, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just like what you would see, a typical passage you would see on the exam, right?
Mhm.
It's not the easiest read, but it's also sort of interesting. Like it sort of catches your attention.
Yeah.
The problem with these kinds of passages is if you feel like you know what's being said, you may accidentally create assumptions and biases that
Hmm.
hurt you on the questions.
Yeah.
And so the best advice I can give you is even if you have some knowledge on the topic or if you like the topic, don't make the mistake of filling in the blank or things that you don't really completely understand. And whatever you do understand, make sure it's actually crystal clear in your head and it's perceived exactly how the author wants you to perceive it. I
Hmm.
think that's the most challenging part is like, hey, do I really understand what the author is trying to say? Uh,
Yeah.
that's practice. That's where that comes in.
Yeah. And it's discipline too, especially like you're so used to
Yeah.
in the science passages, you read it and you're like, okay, well, what do I know about this? What do I know about this topic? How am I going to understand this science paragraph or science sentence based on the content that I know? That's totally the opposite of what we want to do in cars. So that's great advice. This is obviously about being a fan of soccer. That's the content of the passage. If you are a soccer fan, you'd think that'd give you a leg up here. I think more than that, I think it could be a detriment. You just got to be really, really disciplined.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. For
awesome.
sure.
Well, let's go ahead and hop in. As always, like we said, we'll go sentence by sentence, starting with the first sentence of the passage. So, in paragraph one, first sentence says, Simon Critchley is one of the great philosophers of soccer. So, pretty straightforward sentence. We have this individual. I don't know who this is, but the author is explaining, right? It's a great philosopher of soccer. So, not a lot to unpack there, but we get our person that we're going to probably discuss, and we've got our topic, which is soccer philosophy.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I would say this is actually really important because we don't know if Simon Critchley here is actually a great philosopher, right? That
Hmm.
that word "great" catches my attention. You could say he's a philosopher. That probably is like a factual statement, but a great philosopher of soccer, like how do we know if he's great or bad?
Hmm. And
So
what does it mean to be a soccer philosopher?
right.
Like, what actually is that? That's not a great philosopher. Okay, I know what philosophy is, but what is soccer philosophy? Like, what does that
I
mean to
mean,
you?
I mean, I guess soccer is so damn popular. You could have a whole like career just thinking about soccer. I don't
I
know.
know, I
Uh,
know.
but yeah, that's also very intriguing. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack on in just this one sentence. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, our next sentence says, as he explains, the philosophical tradition that most inspires his thinking on the sport is the phenomenology of Jean-Paul Sartre and Maurice Merleau-Ponty, which seeks to illuminate our lives via close attention to the texture of the everyday experience. Okay, I feel like this sentence as a whole, coming from, Simon Critchley's one of the great philosophers of soccer, this one is a lot more complex and more dense. There's a lot more like vocab, right, and jargon in this sentence, but it sounds like we're talking about philosophers that pay attention to the everyday experience. The everyday experience part makes probably the most sense to me. So maybe that's what's shaping our philosophy. That being said, I think this is much more difficult than the sentence that came before. So something about right, understanding people's experience of soccer. That's playing into his philosophy.
That's
That's
exactly it. There is
yeah.
like you said, it's very much jargon, right? It's not very clear. But the part that might make sense is the fact that it illuminates our lives via close attention to the texture of everyday experience. So we're trying to understand how we experience soccer, right? That's basically what it's probably trying to say. And I would just go along the lines of, okay, this is still talking about philosophy. All right, it's sort of in the same category.
Yeah.
Um, they do mention these names. It's not like they're mentioning it because they have something to say. It's more about how this person, Critchley, was inspired by these people. So that's not as important. I would just continue reading to find what possibly could be more important than this.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. All right. Our next sentence says the methodology is perfectly suited to Critchley's purposes. So, okay. I mean, it's the methodology, presumably, is what was just provided for us in that more complicated sentence. So we're just saying that Critchley used that methodology. Again, maybe something to do with everyday experience. We're talking about the philosophy of soccer. Critchley used this. It's hitting on that sentence that came before that was a lot more complicated to understand. So I would keep reading. We know that this is the methodology that he's using.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. He is excellent on the intensity of actually attending a game. Okay, that's a pretty straightforward sentence. And I feel like we're starting to maybe set up a situation where we see the philosophy of soccer. I don't know. We're talking about now the intensity of attending a game. This kind of feels like, an intro to the rest of the paragraph. So that's probably what we're going to talk about is what does Simon Critchley think happens when you attend a game? Why is it intense? What do you feel? Things like that. We'll see.
Right, right. I can just imagine. I mean, you can easily take a lot out of this by thinking about what it means to actually go to a soccer game. We need to understand what the author is trying to say when they talk about intensity of actually attending a game. So hopefully they will expand on that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, as he explains, you climb up through the levels and emerge to behold the unreal green of the pitch. Okay, I don't know about you, Jack, but when I read this, I'm literally imagining it. Like we talk about visualization a lot in the course, trying to kind of watch the car's passage play out in your head while you read. This is as easy to visualize as it could be, I think. I could see you're climbing up the stairs or through the levels. You come up to the top and you just see this bright green, right? Or this unreal green of the pitch. Like it puts you in the story so much. I almost feel what you mean about the intensity, They're
Now,
they're
yeah.
showing, not just telling here. And I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, it's sort of like a personal statement, right? You always want to show instead of just
Hmm.
tell, and it's very descriptive. And I think
Totally.
we've all experienced this somewhere, right? If you've gone to a basketball game or you've gone to a baseball game or even a soccer game, when you go into a stadium, you feel this like sense of like I don't know how to explain it, but it gives you this sense of awe, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, okay.
Yeah. Little burst of energy. Okay, as the game starts, time is suspended in the flow of players and the ball. Again, this language really is very gripping, right? It makes you feel like you're part of the game and you feel the intensity. It's very, very interesting, the writing. I like it a lot. But again, it's easy to lose yourself and be like, oh, okay, this is just reading for fun. I like this. This feels like a novel. And then you stop paying attention, which is
Yeah,
also not good.
yeah, exactly. You're looking for big ideas, right? That you're looking for arguments. So that's a good point to make. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, last sentence of paragraph one. The spectators lose themselves in the rhythm, erupting periodically in response to an unfair foul or goal, completely caught in the drama of the moment. Okay, so again, same situation. It's so gripping. It's so easy to imagine, especially if you are a sports fan or ever have been. Again, our key idea that we've hit on is Simon Critchley, right? We know he's a great philosopher of soccer, and we're kind of understanding one aspect of his philosophy in this intensity aspect or the intensity of attendance, right? It's very gripping. that's kind of all we're getting in my eyes from this portion of the paragraph and from the paragraph as a whole. This is just one of Critchley's ideas, right? This intensity of attendance.
I think that was a perfect summary of this paragraph. Really, nothing in this paragraph like is testable. And I always say that testable. What does that mean? It means that nothing in here is super argumentative, and they're just describing kind of the shared experience of soccer, of attending a game. And
Mhm.
we know it's set it up perfectly that we're going to talk about probably the philosophy of soccer, whatever that means, and they do explain that one aspect of it, right? But we know Simon Critchley here is going to be a big part of that. So, yeah,
Mhm.
I would just read the next paragraph. Given this information, I wouldn't be too tied down to anything here. Just understand it and move on.
Yeah. It's almost like the author is trying to draw you in
Right,
so that you're paying full attention so that they could give you their more important point. Like they're
right.
just getting you interested so far. Okay, well, let's take a look at our next paragraph then. This will be paragraph number 2. It says, at times like these, English soccer fans can lose contact with their normal selves. Okay, so we kind of hinted at that you could lose yourself in the rhythm, but it was just part of this very descriptive, aspect of the intensity. This is a much more direct statement, right? We lose contact with ourselves, or we can, right? These English soccer fans. That I feel like is direct enough that we could point out and say that's an argument, right? Soccer fans can lose themselves when they
Yeah,
attend
you
games.
can argue that they don't, right? That
Yeah.
they're really focused and they understand what's going on, right? We
Hmm.
don't know exactly what it means when you lose yourself. Hopefully they
Exactly.
expand on that,
Yeah.
but it is definitely an argument, and it's sort of this is where it gets tough. Even though the topic is really simple to understand, we're talking about soccer, right? And the experience, but it's getting philosophical, right? Like, what does it mean
Mhm.
to lose yourself? Like, who talks like that? Kind of reminds me of Eminem, right?
Literally, that was the first thing that I thought of.
Don't lose me, whatever
Yeah.
that song is. But ultimately, these passages can get a little deeper than you would expect, and we have to just accept that and embrace it, right?
Yes,
Okay, cool.
absolutely. Okay, so our next sentence says, as Critchley puts it, quote, we will say anything, end quote. So maybe this is what it means to lose contact with your normal self. We will say anything, but we'll say what? Like anything to do what? What, it's still not super clear, but we get a quote from Critchley. So again, it seems like this is in line with Critchley's ideas. We will say anything. To me, that doesn't fully clarify what it means to lose yourself.
Right. I'm thinking, are they cursing? Are they like, what are they doing? Well,
Yeah.
right.
Yelling at the ref, like
Yeah,
what does that mean?
right.
Again, hopefully we get context.
I
We have
mean,
one more.
I've seen some crazy, soccer games where the
Mhm.
audience is so like invested, like
Yes.
it's scary, like it's,
Yes.
but I mean, I guess that's the whole experience. Okay, let's see, where this goes.
Okay. We see the old seatless terraces may be gone, and $100 tickets mean that for the most part, fans are nearly all prosperous and law abiding. We see a semicolon here. So we're saying it costs $100 to sit there. And so for the most part, the people who can afford $100 are prosperous and law abiding. But I'm sensing like a but because
Yeah,
we've framed this sentence with you lose contact with your normal selves. We've kind of established the people in attendance abide laws and we do well for ourselves. So why are we losing context or contact? What does that mean?
yeah, and this is something we talk about, right? We anticipate a contrast word that will eventually go towards the losing yourself, right? Because that's something
Mhm.
that the author is obviously caring about here.
Yeah.
The reason why the author brought up the fact that we're law abiding isn't because it's not true, it probably is, but it's not the bigger point, right? It's
Yeah.
something that the author is using as an anchor to seem more neutral, right? To seem more
Hmm.
reasonable or
Hmm.
rational, right? Rational people always try to bring both sides of the argument up. Ultimately, they side with one, but they always bring up both sides. It makes them seem more believable,
Informed.
right? And so that's probably what the author is trying to do here is they want to seem like, okay, yeah, I understand that they end up coming to the event and paying $100 and sitting there, whatever. but there's something deeper about losing yourself that the author is about to expand on.
Yes, absolutely. So we stopped at the semicolon to reflect, but let's keep going. So it says, but, which there's our contrast word, but with emotions riding on a knife's edge, explosions of testosterone fueled aggression are seldom far away. So we had said we lose contact with the normal selves. And then we kind of said, actually, we're all pretty prosperous and law abiding. And I'm thinking, so why are we losing ourselves? Then we finish, right? That sentence in saying, hey, yeah, we're prosperous. Yeah, we're law abiding, but there's something about the atmosphere around soccer that can make you behave differently, right? If you're law abiding, why are you having explosions of testosterone fuel aggression so close, right? It's because of something going on with soccer. So, this whole context provided is helping us understand that soccer can make people lose themselves or lose contact with themselves. Now I feel like we kind of understand what that is saying and meaning.
I mean, I kind of had an idea just because I have some idea of what happens at these soccer games, and this just solidified it, right? But I'm
Uh-huh.
not gonna just guess. I'm gonna read, I'm gonna pay attention, and it made it very clear it's this knife's edge, explosions of testosterone-fueled aggression. So aggression, like, when something happens that's great for your team, you're gonna be loud and really happy. When something goes bad, you're gonna be upset and yell at the ref or whatever you do, right? And
Mhm.
so, yeah, it seems like it's straightforward so far, right?
Yeah.
You just need to know, you just need to keep track of this idea, and it's clear that whose idea is this, right?
Critchley's. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the author is presenting the idea.
Hmm.
Critchley is supporting it as well,
Yeah.
right? So Critchley again seems to be important because he's one of those great philosophers, right? And if the author makes a point that Critchley also believes, well, maybe, right? That's how the author is trying to paint this is maybe this is actually the case, right?
Yes.
That this
Yes.
philosopher of soccer agrees with me. Like, so you must believe this too, that English soccer fans, and by the way, that's important. We're talking about English soccer fans, so
Hmm.
anyone who lives in London or somewhere in UK, basically Britain or UK. So in this case, we need to understand the context behind this as well, right? But
Yeah.
ultimately, this is the idea that the author shares and Critchley also shares.
Yes.
Okay.
So the author is bringing them together on the same page,
Right.
which helps the author's credibility too, if this is a great philosopher of soccer. So,
Right.
okay, let's look into our third paragraph. It says, at the same time, soccer fandom can be a force for rationality and good citizenship. Cool. That is a pretty big contrast, not like a contrast word, but that idea of it can make you more rational and inspire good citizenship. That feels kind of different from what came before of you could lose yourself, right? And you become more aggressive, you become, more like focused on just the game. So we're now talking about the other side, right? That this could actually help, this could be a force for rationality and make us better citizens, whatever, the author means by that. So with the at the same time, it sounds like the author is saying these two things are happening simultaneously. They are different and yet they are both present at the same time. So we're just kind of exploring a different aspect of this, maybe effect that soccer fandom can have on a person.
I can see how a student might be confused because it does say that you lose yourself. So how can you be rational and a good citizen, right?
Mhm.
They can
Yeah.
both equally exist and
Mhm.
coexist. Like you could be a good citizen, be rational, and also kind of lose yourself in the moment,
Yeah.
right? So I wouldn't say that they're necessarily competing with one another, right? They
Mhm.
could be. I mean, the author may make the case that sometimes you lose yourself, sometimes you're a good rational person. But it doesn't seem like the author is trying to say that if you're rational, you can't lose yourself or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
another paragraph, right? It separated itself from the previous paragraph and it's making another point. And you
Mhm.
need to just keep track of all these points. First paragraph, like I said, not much going on there. The fact that this guy is a great philosopher is not much we can, like be tested on. But the second paragraph that you lose yourself, right? Or that you can be rational and a good citizen. These are very specific, and you need to be paying attention to how the author makes these arguments and where they are located.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and the author's saying these happen at the same time. So clearly the author doesn't believe that these are mutually exclusive.
Exactly. That's a good point too. Okay.
Yeah. So let's see what they say. I'm sure they'll expand on it. So the next sentence says it can make people their best selves. So I think that, I mean, it's stated a lot more simply in this sentence, but I feel like it's pretty consistent with the sentence that came before, right? It's making you, it can make you more rational, it can make you a good citizen, it can make you your best self,
Right.
right? So
Consistent.
it's the
Yeah.
good side of soccer.
Right. I'm so curious to understand how.
I know, I know. That's what it's fun. This is like a really intriguing passage.
Right.
Okay, let's see. Liverpool fans think of themselves as special. Okay. So it makes us our best self because we think we're special? Like, how does that relate?
Yeah, it hasn't said that, but it could. I mean, all it's done is explain what Liverpool fans think of themselves. Let's see how
Hmm.
they connect this.
Hmm. Okay. They were scarred by two of the worst stadium tragedies of the 1980s, and their team oscillates wildly between triumph and disappointment. Okay. This we've got good and bad things happening for Liverpool. It sounds like we're going to make Liverpool somewhat of an example. We're giving a lot of context for their situation, but I still don't know how this connects to good citizenship or rationality or being your best self. It seems like
Yeah.
we're just setting up context and then we'll tie it back maybe later in the paragraph.
Right. Don't assume or guess. Like, I wouldn't go and say, oh, well, because they had the two worst stadium tragedies, and I don't know what that means exactly. Probably like they lost
Yeah,
games.
a
That
tough loss.
that's why they're special, that they can withstand difficulty. They didn't say that, right?
Hmm.
So we need to be careful bringing in our own kind of arguments or our own ideas into the fold when it's not clear. I think that's a common trap is when we don't fully grasp something, we try to fill in the blank ourselves. Let's keep reading to see where the author's going with this.
Yes.
Okay.
In Mr. Critchley's own words, the club is prone to become, quote, mired with a sense of its own victimization, end quote. Okay, so the club might feel that they are being victimized because they're going triumph and disappointment kind of back and forth, that wild oscillation. Again, it's not clear how this connects to the argument about rationality and good citizenship and being your best self. So we're still talking about Liverpool and what's going on with Liverpool. I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for a connection here, but we still haven't gotten it yet.
Okay.
Okay, yet only the most benighted Liverpool supporter, he observes, can fail to recognize that rival fans have their own traditions and folklore. So we see a yet, right? Which, my ears kind of perk up. It sounds like we're kind of saying even the people who are the most diehard Liverpool fans still see their fellow or their rival fans as having their own situation going on, right? Like maybe there's some level of like, you know, we still have some mutual respect, even if they cheer for a different team. It's not super clear yet. I feel like we're on our way to making a connection for rationality and good citizenship and being our best selves, but it's not concrete enough yet. I'm just glad to see that maybe we're inching towards that
Yeah,
because
I
I've
think
been waiting for it.
that's a good way of looking at it. You're inching towards it. Don't stop and start making your own conclusions, right? And it's still not clear to me. I still don't
Mhm.
understand what this is saying. That
Yeah.
that you can fail to recognize that rival fans have their own traditions. Like what? How does that have anything to do with the fact that you're rational and a good citizen? Right.
Hmm.
Okay.
Okay, two sentences left here in paragraph 3. The second to last, it says the zeal of blind partisanship coexists with the intelligent recognition that others have an equal right to success. Okay, I feel like that the first half of that sentence feels pretty overwhelming, but it sounds like we're saying, you know, this zeal or this sensation that Liverpool is experiencing perhaps, right, is also accompanied by, I think the second, the recognition that others have an equal right to success. I think that makes a little more sense, even though it's still not concrete. Still not super concrete. It sounds like maybe we're implying there's good and bad sides of this. They coexist, right? But I don't know yet. I'm still unsure. We've got one last sentence, and I'm hoping that this clears up how Liverpool relates to being rational and good citizens.
Okay.
One last sentence. It's short and sweet. Even Liverpool fans want the game to be fair. Okay, I feel like that at least that's the most concrete that we've had so far, right? We know that the argument was that this, cheering for a soccer team or soccer fandom can make people rational, can make people good citizens. Liverpool seemed to be a pretty extreme example because they've had the worst stadium tragedies and they're oscillating wildly with good and bad outcomes. And it seems like even Liverpool fans want it to be fair. Even the people that might want it most desperately to go in their favor, even they want it to be fair. So it seems like perhaps we've set up Liverpool as a way to illustrate, even on the extreme cases, all fans, all soccer fans want this to be fair, right?
That's perfect. That's exactly where this is going, right? The idea of rationality and good citizenship comes from the fact that they want a game that's fair. Even this is an example, right? Even in this case of people who have tragedies, right? This group of soccer fans who have tragedies within their soccer team, right? I think
Mhm.
that's perfect. It's a great way of looking at it, and that's exactly what they're trying to say.
Awesome. Okay, so that's paragraph 3. Let's look into paragraph 4. First sentence is super short. It says, the moral is a general one. I don't know about you, Jack, but I read that and I'm like, huh?
Yeah,
Like, there's
yeah,
nothing there.
nothing.
It's the what is the moral and what does it mean that it's a general one? Like
Nothing.
I feel like that's kind of like an empty sentence. I'm
Very, very. But it is establishing that we're talking about some sort of
moral, yeah.
moral, which means like when I think of moral, I think the moral of the story. So maybe the point that we're trying to,
Yeah.
right? So this might be very important, but let's see where this goes because this could again be more jargon, right?
I I like that idea of the moral of the story. But
Right.
yeah, let's see, because we definitely need to clarify. So many people's sense of identity expresses itself in the soccer fandom. Okay, that's a lot more clear. So we identify with soccer in some ways, right? Or we express identity through soccer. And this is not just one person, this is many people. So identity can express itself through soccer. That sounds like an argument, and it's not directly related to what we've talked about in the past. So I think that's a sentence to track.
Yeah, I mean the idea that soccer fandom allows people to know yourself, right?
Mhm,
Understand yourself better, express
mhm.
yourself, right? Create an identity for yourself. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. We see our next sentence says, some see this as a malign influence. It can make people worse. Okay. We kind of knew that fans could lose themselves. And again, that whole idea of the testosterone fueled aggression, like maybe not the best. Maybe that I don't know if that's aligned or what. It can make people worse. I don't know that the author thinks that overall, but that's definitely a claim that we've said. Um, so soccer can make people worse. I kind of feel like we might end up with it can also make us better, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I think the key here is some, right? Some
Mhm.
people, not everyone, right?
Yes.
And so I think the in the author's pursuit to seem more reasonable and rational and for the audience to believe them, they have to be a little negative about themselves, right? Or
Mhm.
their arguments, excuse me. So I wouldn't know though. Maybe they are going down this route. I mean, they maybe the author really doesn't believe that that soccer fan, being a fan of soccer can lead to understanding yourself better or having a
Yeah.
better expression of yourself. Like this idea of identity expression might be something the author disagrees with, right? But
Mhm.
but at this point, it seems like we're not talking about the identity expression stuff. We're just going into this idea that being a fan of soccer, right, has a malign influence. It makes you
Mhm.
worse, right?
Yeah.
So that it's I don't think it's really I don't think it's challenging the initial sentence, the previous sentence. I think it's just
Yeah.
deviating. I think it's just going
Mhm.
to another argument about, being a fan of soccer.
Yeah. And for anyone that's listening and thinking like, well, why are we talking all about this? I feel like it's valuable to look at this sentence. You can almost treat it as a example scenario. Like the phrasing is some see this as a malign influence. It can make people worse. The author could have said, this is a malign influence. It makes people worse. Like they didn't phrase it that powerfully. If they had, it would be like, oh, the author believes this. Like some see this as this, and it can make people worse. They've kind of weakened their own statement. That's part of why it's like, okay, maybe we're just expressing different sides of this. Doesn't carry the same weight as if we had said, this is a malign influence. It makes people worse. That takes away the uncertainty. So I
Yes.
think we'll develop that a little bit more. But I feel like that's an interesting sentence to look at. It
Yeah,
could have been much stronger if the author felt it was a guarantee.
right. It's so important to keep track of how the author makes their arguments, right? What words they use. You have to really feel immersed in the conversation, or else you're not going to find those points, those
Hmm.
sentences that can really guide you,
Yeah.
those words that can guide you.
Hmm. Okay. So it can make people worse. That's the idea that we're tracking. Our next sentence says George Orwell said that sport is, quote, war minus the shooting, end quote. But Orwell missed the point. Okay. Orwell, saying that sports are war minus the shooting. I mean, when I think of war, I think of death and loss and like, fighting each other. It's war minus the shooting. Orwell at least wants us to associate war and sport. But then right after saying that, Orwell missed the point. So I don't think based on the author, I don't think we should think sports is war minus the shooting. Orwell missed the point. This is also kind of a dot 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 of maybe it doesn't make people worse. Maybe it doesn't bring out the worst in people like war might.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's perfect. I would still know that Orwell agrees with this idea that it makes people worse, but
Yes.
I think the fact that it says missed the point means the author is not agreeing.
Yeah.
And that's important. Okay, cool.
Mhm. Okay. The very nature of sporting contests works to undermine historical animosity. That just sounds like, yeah, it's not war. It undermines animosity. This I think is more complex. If you're less familiar with this language, that's fine. But again, Orwell missed the point. This sentence is supporting that, right? The
Yeah.
author doesn't believe that sport is war minus the shooting.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay, both sides engage on an equal footing, and all must accept that the victors are more deserving. Okay. So it's bringing people together almost is kind of what it sounds like in terms of like the underlying theme of that sentence, right? It's more equal, right? It's not so vicious almost. Um that's what it seems like from the sentence.
I mean, this also assumes that war is not equal, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yes, true.
it's saying, like, you missed the point. It's really not about war minus the shooting, because in war, maybe there is no, equal footing, and not everyone accepts the victors are more deserving. But here they do. So this is context for understanding how soccer or sports in general like play a role here. So okay, sounds
Mhm.
good.
Yeah. So we have the idea that soccer can or soccer fandom can make people worse. That we associate with Orwell. But then we also kind of see this other side where we had talked about identity expressing itself through soccer fandom. And it almost seems like, people get to know themselves better in this context. And, they're almost more fair. They could be their like best and fairest self. It almost seems like. Um, so that's what I would be pulling out. And we want to tie the idea with Orwell to making people worse.
Right.
Um, cool. Okay, well, let's look at our fifth paragraph. It says, what's more, the soccer fan can also express some of the highest achievements of the human spirit, the human capacity for rational analysis. Okay, that sounds kind of familiar when we talked about rationality. That's though the highest achievement of the human spirit. So I wouldn't say that it's a brand new idea, but that's a pretty strong phrasing. Highest achievement of the human spirit. Yeah, they're clearly, I feel like that's more tone, giving us context for tone than anything else. But cool. Soccer can create rational analysis, and that might be a good thing, according to the author.
Yep.
Okay, according to Critchley, soccer allows us to discover our own identity as intellectual beings. Okay, so this is kind of very similar to our discussion of identity in the last paragraph, right? Because that was our key idea, is that identity expresses itself in soccer fandom. Now we're saying we discover our identity through soccer as intellectual beings. We're kind of fusing this idea of sports can make us more rational and sports help us discover our identity, which both of those things are things that we've talked about before. But
Yeah.
again,
This is bringing it back. But now, who's supporting this idea, right? It's Critchley.
Critchley, yeah.
So now, it's interesting. The previous paragraph brought up the idea, but didn't go into expanding on it or helping us understand it. As
Hmm.
well, here the author brings it back up. Now they've mentioned it in a different way, but it's exactly the same idea.
Yeah.
But now it's using Critchley as a source of support.
Yes. Okay. That rational capacity lies behind the developments of tactics and is important for those who want to subject the flow of soccer to, quote, Moneyball style statistical analysis. Okay. I feel like that was less clear, especially coming out of the last sentence that so clearly kind of echoed the paragraph before. We're talking more about rational capacity. It has something to do with tactics. I don't know what Moneyball style is, but I know what statistical analysis is. Stats and tactics have something to do with rational capacity. I don't think that's as direct with an argument. I'm not going to worry as much about that. But again, it seems like we're kind of reiterating that soccer helps us understand ourselves and our identity. We have some level of rationality mentioning here too.
Yeah, no, it didn't really support it well in the previous paragraph, but the fact that it's been repeating tells me that this is probably one of our main ideas.
Hmm.
It's why would the author bring it up again and again and again, right?
Yeah.
And so let's see where this goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Despite soccer fandom having the capacity to bring out our best selves, the connection between sport and identity can also lead off in some unsavory directions. Okay, I feel like this sentence, if you've been paying close attention, most students are going to read this and just like throw up their hands or like want to bang their head against the wall. Because it seems like we started off by saying, sports helps us. There's a whole philosophy of soccer. Then we said fans can lose themselves, and it seemed kind of negative. And then it makes us our best selves, but then it makes people worse. But then it helps us understand our identity. And despite the fact that soccer fandom has the capacity to bring out our best selves, so the author believes that. Despite that, it also makes us worse. I feel like this passage would probably give most students whiplash back and
Right,
forth and back and forth. They're not saying these are all mutually exclusive. It seems like
right.
the author believes it can bring out our best self and it can also have some problematic aspects too. They've never introduced that it's one or the other or that one is true and the other is false. I feel like the passage is kind of trying to find that gray area as
Yeah.
far as soccer and individual identity or people as individuals.
Look, this idea of how soccer fandom can make people worse is now
Mhm.
also repeating.
Yes.
And again, these two ideas are not exclusive, right? They can both exist, coexist. And so maybe we have two main ideas. One is this idea that it allows you to know yourself better, but then also maybe it makes you worse, right? We have to see which one
Mhm.
seems more important to the author.
Yeah. Okay. Critchley points to the commercialization and corruption of elite soccer, the exploitative merchandising, and the bribery that decides World Cup hosts. Okay, so this doesn't really sound like it makes individual people worse, or at least the sentence doesn't seem to support that as much. It more seems like it's talking about soccer as a sport and like the institution of soccer. So, okay, that's what we're more focused on. We haven't really talked about that so much yet, but maybe that's the unsavory direction that we're talking about. I'd keep reading.
Yeah,
Okay, here though, he must leave phenomenology behind for Marxism in order to investigate the economic pressures behind this. Okay, I feel like this sentence we're not getting a ton, right? We understand, like you said, we're talking about sport and identity having some bad consequences, some unsavory directions. That's an idea that we've seen before. There's some negative consequence here, which was what we brought up in paragraph 4, right? Here we're saying Critchley agrees, and it sounds like we're talking about soccer, like the actual, not the sport, the actual game, but the like institution around it, but it's so much less clear. So soccer fandom can, have negative consequences. That's the idea I would see from this paragraph.
that's it. That's it, which is the same idea from the fourth paragraph. So it seems like all the author's done is expand the fourth paragraph, which is something we're kind of anticipating because the moral is a general one, right? And then it
Mhm.
went into these two arguments, and so they've just expanded on both of them in the fifth and sixth paragraph. Let's
Yeah.
see, let's see where this goes at the end, last paragraph.
Yeah. Last paragraph, paragraph 7. In allowing fandom to reveal ourselves, it can also reveal other aspects of the world around us. Mm. Jack, in past episodes, you've talked about how the last paragraph of a passage sometimes is a repetition of something you have before. Sometimes it kind of clinches and brings everything together, and sometimes you just go off on a tangent and it's like completely unrelated, right? It sounds like, we're talking about we're understanding ourselves now, or because we understand ourselves now, we're understanding the world. We might be going off on a bit of a tangent here.
Exactly. But I like this paragraph because it goes back to realizing ourselves.
Yeah,
That seems to be more prominent than the fact that there's
makes
negative
us worse.
negative associations to soccer fandom. I would still know both ideas, but it does seem like the author is making a bigger claim or bigger point to this idea, even though it's in passing, this idea of how it allows us to know ourselves better.
Hmm.
But both of them are important.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Okay, for instance, there is a way the ball itself can seem to take on a life of its own and can come to seem intelligent and aware as playing its own part in the vibrant spectacle. That's fun language. It's almost tying back to the really intriguing and, interesting language from paragraph 1, where you could almost see it. The ball takes on a life of its own and, like it's getting you in the story, but it's also not really communicating anything key. Same deal as paragraph 1, where there wasn't really a ton that was testable.
Right. Well, this is going off that tangent, right? The world
Yeah,
around
exactly.
us. And so the world around us could be just the ball, right?
Hmm.
What happens to the ball? Okay.
Yeah. And this is a quote: In animating the ball, we animate ourselves, Critchley claims, making us feel alive with a particularly intense sense of aliveness. Critchley, very astute observation. Um, we feel alive with a particularly intense sense of aliveness. That's hilarious. But okay, in animating the ball, we animate ourselves again. We have some connection to our identity with soccer as a soccer fan, and it helps us understand the world around us. I think that's pretty much the key little tangent we're going off in P7.
Yeah, it is definitely a tangent, but it kind of does support that idea that we've been talking about, right? How it reveals ourselves.
Hmm.
And it does mention Critchley again as a support, right?
Yes.
And so yeah, this is a very one-off paragraph idea, and so you may get a question about it, you know where it's coming from, right?
Yeah.
Or what it was trying to target here.
Hmm.
Overall, I would say the read is not so bad, but
Hmm.
figuring out what is the author's claim is pretty tough here. And I would
Yeah.
say it's pretty straightforward. It's that one like being a fan of soccer allows you to know yourself better. The other one is for sure going to be that it could also make you a little worse, right? Make you worse.
Mhm.
So I think those are two big ideas, but definitely this idea of revealing something about yourself that you didn't know is it seems to be the bigger theme.
Yeah. And I feel like this passage is a really important one to talk about because when an author engages with both sides of an argument, students really struggle in questions because if both sides of the argument are supported and explained well, they're going to really struggle with the questions because they don't know which one the author leans towards. So if you ever see an author that explains both sides of an argument and supports both sides of an argument, you have to be constantly asking yourself, what did they lean towards? Are they truly neutral? Like in this case, even in passing, we had sentences like the first sentence of paragraph 6 and 7, like we state, despite soccer fandom having the capacity to bring out our best selves, or in allowing the fandom to reveal ourselves, like they've hit on that point of we help or we understand ourselves better as soccer fans because of it, or we are our best or fairest selves. They bring that up so constantly. You could feel the author kind of lean towards that. If you ever have an author that goes into both sides of an argument that seem like to you they are exclusive or they're in conflict, you got to dig deeper, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not exclusive.
Yeah.
And the author does lean towards that side of knowing themselves better. Um, so I feel like there's a lot of take home that you can have from a passage like this.
I think that's a great point. Now, when I say that this is also a main idea, I don't really mean that this is the author's claim, right?
Hmm.
It's just a theme of the passage. It's part of the main idea, as in it's something the author cared about discussing a lot.
Yeah.
But absolutely, the author is citing on this idea, and it seems like this is a competing theme, right? There's positives, and you get to know yourself better through soccer, being a fan of soccer, and then there's also negatives. The author is definitely leaning towards that positive part.
Yeah.
But you should know that the author does make this other claim, right? Or there is a claim out there that the author isn't necessarily supporting as well, but acknowledges. And so you may get questions surrounding these two. And it does seem like it is a competing theme to some extent.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
so I mean it's a little iffy, it's a little gray, but that's okay. We have to answer questions using the gray area that we've read,
Hmm.
right? And again, like you said, being careful, being considerate, noticing the word selection, noticing the structure, that all gives it away as to what the author really cares about.
Yeah. And you always say, sometimes the hardest, most dense passages actually have the easiest questions. I feel like a kind of parallel to that is the passages that are really interesting to read or the ones that they know that certain people are going to really connect with tend to be more confusing in the actual arguments that are made. Like they want to see if you can slow yourself down and pay close attention. It
Yeah,
seems like a lot of the really fun reads are actually you've got a lot to juggle when it comes to the arguments or the claims made. So,
yeah.
just be aware. And of course, you've heard our discussion of the passage. I'd love for you guys to reflect on, how you read this passage the first time, if you read it ahead of time. And of course, make sure you attempt the questions with this one, right? We want you to get practice, especially now that you understand what the main ideas are and the perspective of the author. Give yourself the chance to attempt these questions and see how you would do with the solid understanding of the passage. It's a way to kind of eliminate some of the variables that may sway your question performance, given that now you have a solid understanding of the arguments. So definitely give these questions a try. And if you want more car strategy, come see us in our free car sessions. We have a lot of fun in those sessions. It's live. If you enjoy going through these passages with us, we encourage you guys to come check them out. We hold those every single week on our website. So if you want, jackwestin.com, and you could check out our free sessions that we hold every single week. One of them's in cars. We tend to have a lot of fun with that one. So thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you join us for our next Cars Reading Skills workshop. And until then, happy studying, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.